I've been a business owner for the last 15 years. And within that time, tons of things have happened in the world that have fired me up, that have made me want to stand up and declare things from the rooftops. And I have had to be very selective about what it is that I engage with and participate in online in expressing my opinion. In today's episode, we are going to be diving in more in depth of our freedom of speech and how we exercise things and communicate on social media while also taking into account that we are business owners and how that impacts us. This might be a little bit of a heavy episode, but I think you're going to get a lot out of it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Cheer Biz Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Cotton, and today we are diving into the question of, do business owners have true freedom of speech? Now, before we get into the episode, please make sure that you are in Cheer Gym Owners on Facebook and All-Star Cheer Coaches and Owners on Facebook in both of those groups, so you are not missing out on any of the amazing conversations we have going on there. On top of that, head on over to nextgenowners.com and check out one of our Cheer Biz accelerators. You guys, if you have ever wanted to learn from me, from Shelly, from Danielle, and be in person in our gyms, this is your opportunity. Now, the CBA in Oregon is pretty much sold out. You probably can't get out here to our Oregon event in October, I'm sorry to say, but you can still work with me and Danielle in Missouri in January. There's also another event in Reno. We are going to be having these events throughout the year. Our goal is to give you more opportunities to get with us rather than just singular conferences. Now, we still have our summer conference in Texas planned, so don't worry. There still will be our amazing, massive conference we do in the summertime. But these are more intensive and specifically for you gym owners to really focus on how to accelerate your business. All right, now let's get into the episode. At the time of recording, it has been not quite a week since the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and I'm not going to dive into the politics of that event, but it certainly brought to light the concept of freedom of speech and freedom of expression, and specifically with business owners. I had this conversation with other gym owners who were like, I'm really struggling because I want to say certain things and I don't know if it's appropriate to say those things and I'm afraid of getting backlash. And I saw some people who stood up and they said what they wanted to say and they faced backlash on both sides of the political spectrum. So I think it is important to dive into this subject because I think it is front of everyone's mind. And I know there were people, myself included, who were frustrated in some ways because we didn't necessarily speak our mind. In fact, I said nothing on the matter, which is very common for me. And I think that comes from years of experience. So I'll tell you a little background, right? You all know that, or if you've listened to the podcast for any length of time, you know that I served in law enforcement for 15 years. I proudly served the citizens of Beaverton as a full-time sworn police officer. I had a lot of opinions during this time about politics, about things that occurred in the world. And I, generally speaking, did my best to not go to social media to proclaim what those beliefs were. Because I learned over time that I was yelling into the abyss. The people who agreed with me would like my post and pat me on the back. And the people who disagreed with me would fire back. And any debate back and forth did nothing to help the situation. People just became more entrenched in their belief, especially because they were behind a keyboard. I learned that it was much better to have conversations with people so you could hear tone and context and you could go back and forth and refute things in real time versus having a conversation online. I also learned in law enforcement, you don't actually have freedom of speech in a lot of ways, which you may be listening to that and saying, well, what do you mean? Of course you do. And you do to an extent. So I said I was going to tell you a story. I got into trouble a number of times in my career as a police officer for a variety of things, not writing a report soon enough, losing something that belonged to a custody, forgetting it on the side of the road. I had a buddy who drove off. The custody's phone was on the top of his car and it fell off and broke because he forgot it was up there. I accidentally hit a street sign that I had to write up and then be like, yeah, I kind of ran into that thing and broke it. So those things happen, right? People get into trouble. But the only time I got into really serious trouble, it was over a social media post I made And it was very early in my career. I was young and I'd only been in the job for like maybe 2 years, maybe 3. And I made a comment about leaving work angry. And that's really all I said. Left work more angry than I ever have. Great way to start a vacation, I think, was my post. It got to my supervisors. And the next thing I knew, I was sitting in front of supervisors doing a recorded interview and discussing how that wasn't appropriate. You could have said, well, you have freedom of speech, and you do. In the United States, you generally have the freedom of speech and expression. That doesn't actually fully translate to your job, though. Freedom of speech laws vary from country to country. I'm going to mostly discuss America, the United States, because I don't know Canadian law very well. I don't know UK law all that well. I know that they have slightly more restrictive speech, but every country has restrictions on what speech is allowed and not allowed. In the United States, there's restrictions on incitement to violence. Things that are likely to cause panic, fear, or danger to other people are not necessarily covered under that freedom of speech. Now, this is where people can get kind of wishy-washy, where people think certain things do endanger them that maybe don't. The example used is you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, and it's actually frequently used all the time, but that case itself was actually overturned. You somewhat can, but I had to learn early on in my position that people could say many, many things to me, and that didn't mean that I could pop off back to them. So they had the freedom of speech to express to me as a police officer that I thought I was no better than a bug that they stepped on that they wiped in a pile of dog poop. Like I was nothing, and they could say anything they wanted to me, and I couldn't criminally I couldn't charge them for that. I couldn't say, you know what? Your mouth got you into trouble. Now you're going to jail. You can't say that to me. You hurt my feelings, jail time. And that is where the freedom of speech comes in. I, however, did not have the freedom of speech back to them because I am regulated by my employer. So there are expectations as an officer to conduct yourself in a particular way. And so I could not necessarily fire back and tell them all the horrible things about them that I was potentially thinking and expect that I'm going to go back and I'm going to get a high five and a pat on the back from my supervisor. I'm probably going to get written up. I could even get suspended and maybe even terminated if it's a serious enough issue. So you do have a freedom of speech in the United States in the sense of, as long as what you are doing is not a direct call to violent action intended to harm people, as long as it is not that, you generally can say it without fear of governmental intrusion into your life. The government is not going to come and knock on your door and put handcuffs on you and say, you violated our, speech laws and now it's time to go to jail. Those just don't really exist on the books anywhere in the United States. But that doesn't mean that you have full and true freedom of speech and expression at your employer or with your job. So even if you don't own the business, you don't truly have freedom of speech. Your employee as a coach in your gym, if they walk into your gym, do they have the freedom of speech to walk into your office and tell you everything they think is wrong with the gym? You do this wrong, you do this wrong. I hate you. You suck. Dan, you're bald. And I think that is pathetic and you should be a man and grow some real hair. And I don't like you and bleep this and bleep that. And I hope you die, but I'm going to go coach my class. No, that wouldn't work. And hopefully you're laughing at my bald jokes. That wouldn't happen. You would go, hold on there, Munchkin. You need to come back in here. I need your key. I need your work shirt. Here's your final check. Goodbye. Wish you the best, but I don't actually wish you anything good at the moment based off how you hurt my feelings. Now, could I call the police and say my employee just said I was bald and I should grow some real hair and have the police come and arrest them? No, because that is covered by their freedom of speech within the context of the world, in the context of government intrusion, but it is not free from the consequence of potentially losing your job. And so the same thing exists for business owners, except it's on another level, because in your job, the people you have to worry about ultimately deciding whether or not your speech was appropriate is your employer. Your employer is going to be the person who says that was okay or that was not okay. Potentially like the USASF or things like that might weigh in, depending on what it is you're saying or engaging in. But as a business owner, every single customer is a judge of whether or not what we say is in alignment with their values, so much so that they're willing to pay you money. We all have choices when it comes to what we spend our money on. And we certainly have the freedom to not spend money with companies that we don't agree with politically, emotionally, spiritually. That is entirely up to you as a customer. You who are listening to this, it is your choice as a customer. And people who are our customers within our business, they also have that same freedom to make the choice of how they spend their money. So you need to be very, very strategic on what it is that you are putting out in the world when in regard to your beliefs. Generally speaking, politics is not where I think we should be throwing a ton out there. Now, you may be looking at the events of last week and saying it was far more than politics to me, which is why I actually don't fault anyone who posted various things. There are certain people who I agree with and certain people who I don't. And some people posted things that I vehemently disagree with. And I know that person is not someone that is on the same wavelength as me, and I maybe don't need them involved in my life very much. And for the most part, the people who stuck out to me were actually things that people I thought were like friends or distant friends that I found concerning. And I'm willing to say, I am not a person who is okay with people celebrating someone else being murdered. I just am not okay with it. I am also not okay with anyone calling for civil war or continued violence. As a person who has had to execute violence in my life, calculated violence against other people who are trying to harm me and or others, I don't want to see that. I don't want that to happen. I don't think it is good for us. And the people who are calling for those things aren't the people who actually understand it. If you look at most true veterans of the recent global war on terror, people who actually were on the ground, people who've been police officers in violent situations, those are not the people who are calling for violence. Those are the people who are more frequently calling for calm, because we've seen the damage that those things cause to everyone. I will say that. I will say I am not okay with that. And I'm willing to die on that hill, is the phrase of expression. And I think that is where you ultimately need to make that decision. Now, some people are too emphatic about the amount of hills that they're willing to die on. Where you tend to see this for most people is their faith. Most people are willing to stick their faith out there and say, this is important to me. And if you're a gym owner, are you absolutely allowed to have a faith and make that public declaration of your faith? 100%. There are numerous gyms that are religiously based, that believe that that is a core part of their identity, and they attract people who align with that. And that's totally okay. That, again, is your freedom of speech. But that doesn't mean that you are then free to make everyone participate in your gym. You have the freedom to express that, just like the people who don't align with that, who don't want a faith-based gym, have the right to go to one that is not a faith-based gym. That could be a big enough deal for some people where they say, I don't want that because I don't want that discussed with my child. And I know that prayer is a part of the gym or whatever, and that's their choice. So you need to, as a business owner, realize you absolutely do have the freedom of speech, but what speech is so important to you that you are unwilling to remain silent? What you will notice is most of the time I remain silent, mostly because I don't see the benefit of arguing with people online. Now, there are certain circumstances where I will make public declarations, but I view my position as a leader, as a really, really important part of my life. I take it very seriously, and I know that my words are really important. And so I choose them very specifically, especially when I'm making posts, because I know how long those things can live. I know the profound impact that a singular post can have. And so I try to be very, very strategic about those things. Again, it doesn't mean that I don't post at all. I also do assess what is the emotional capacity for people to hear the nuance in my language. I know people who posted condolences to Charlie Kirk's family for having lost their husband, and the statement that violence is never the answer. And those people saw hate and vitriol from other people. And it wasn't even about them other than, well, how dare you not talk about the school shootings or talk about these people or talk about those people. And we can get into a really back and forth game of did you post about this? Well, did you post about that? Like, look, if you were always posting about every tragic thing that happened in the world, You would have to sit at your computer 24 hours a day, have AI working for you, and constantly be posting to your feed, because unfortunately, we live in a world where that many bad things happen every day and every second. So you could certainly go post until you're blue in the face. Everyone has to make selections on the things that resonate with them on what they choose to talk about. I'm kind of digressing and talking about the silliness of the online approach of discussion, which is why I respect debate. I respect in-person conversation. And ultimately, my challenge to you would be your best freedom of speech and expression is exercised within the walls of your gym. You have the ability to build the future we all want to see. And I know if you're listening to this, that you are probably much like me, and you believe that kids are a gift to this world, and they are our future leaders. And we have the opportunity to use Cheer as a vehicle to educate and inspire them on how to be great citizens, how to care for others, how to sacrifice, how to work as a team, how to never quit on something that they want to achieve. Like, we have so many amazing opportunities in what we do in our building. That, for me, is worth far more than scoring points to someone on a Facebook post or an Instagram post and clapping back at people. Now, I know there's people out there who they thoroughly enjoy that. They enjoy the clapback culture. That's not me. Ultimately, do you have a freedom of speech as a business owner? Yes. Generally, in the United States, 100% you do. You have the constitutional protection of your freedom of speech and expression. The real question is, where is the right way to conduct that speech and that expression? Yes, Facebook and Instagram and X are more the town square where you can have access to everyone in the world. But I would rather spend my time having profound impact on a small group than having a marginal impact on everyone. So that's just my personal beliefs there. You are going to have to know what are the things that matter the most to you. And then I encourage you to fully invest in those things and say, if you want to post about them, go ahead. But you also have to know that not everyone's going to agree with you, no matter what, no matter how logical you think the statement is. Like, I mentioned this in the little short I did on this, but if you were to post, I believe that it is inappropriate. It is absolutely wrong to essay children or physically abuse children. That is just absolutely, it is wrong. And anyone who engages in those kind of behaviors deserves to, spend the rest of their life in prison, or you could even deserves the death penalty, whatever. They're a horrible human being, and they're actually absolutely unredeemable. You could say that online and there would be people who disagree with you. That is a fact. There would be people who disagree, even though that to me is like the most core truth out there in my life. Like, again, as a police officer, I spent 6 years working as a school resource officer, advocating for children, investigating child abuse and neglect and all of these horrible things. And people would ask me, why do you do it? And for me, I'm like, there's no more true victim in my mind than a child who doesn't have the capacity to fully, like, they're just goodness and they are young and they have not learned. And so to take advantage of a child, like children and animals, like they're such a innocent victim, like advocating for them is like so important to me. It's like a part of my core. And so if you go back and look at my Facebook, I did post about like school shootings and things like that and how horrible I thought they were and how we need to make change and how we need to protect our kids. And I put my money where my mouth was. I stopped posting on Facebook and I got in there and I put my physical like safety on the line and said, I will stand in the gap and I will protect these kids. I had a conversation with Tori after the Park Row school shooting. I vividly remember the day it happened. And I had a conversation with her and I said, I need you to understand that if I have a pencil, I don't even have a pencil. If I have nothing, I'm not standing outside and waiting. Like, if there are children being murdered and I know it's happening, I'm not standing out here. If I can impact it, I will. And if that means you're a widow, like, I'm really sorry, but you would be one anyways, because I wouldn't be able to live with myself. That's how core it is to my soul. And so that is something that I might post about. I might talk about, because I believe that everyone deserves to be protected, but especially children. So you have to make those decisions. It's up to you as an individual. You just have to know that with that may come consequence. And for me, If you don't agree with that, like if you don't agree that kids deserve to be protected, then I'm okay with you not coming in my building. In fact, I would prefer it. So you just have to know that when you express views online, it may cause some people to be offended. And if those people are offended, they may choose to not use you for your business services, even though your business services may be amazing. And you have to know that. So oftentimes the easier route is I'm going to remain silent because this isn't one of those hills for me. So that's where we rest. Those are my opinions on it. And in this personal circumstance, I'll be honest, this is actually a hill that's important to me. Like what occurred and my beliefs on what occurred are actually a hill that is important to me, in that I believe the freedom of speech is critical to our world. And I believe that violence to silence people is just absolutely unacceptable. I didn't post about it because people were not in any capacity, emotional capacity, to agree with me. Even if they were on the conflicting side, there was nothing I could say to convince them otherwise, because they would only associate that statement with the individual that they had issue with, even though that individual was more of a catalyst for the conversation, which is that people shouldn't be murdered, which again, to me is like simple. This is literally a simple truth. People should not be murdered. Should you be able to defend yourself against violence? Absolutely. I have myself. Okay. So it is a real thing, but I'm very metered in my approach. And so did I post? No. Did I see lots of people post? Yes. Do I think it was cathartic for those individuals? Maybe. And if that helped them process through whatever they were processing, I can certainly understand that. There were some people that posted such abhorrent things that I said, okay, great. I'm glad to know that is where you stand, and I don't stand with you. And that is like, I also wouldn't then, like, there were people that I saw it, I was like, yeah, that's a note. I don't know if I would hire that person. Like, if we disagree about that, I don't know if I want you involved in my life. And everyone has that ability to make that decision. That is the core of freedom. So do you have the freedom of speech? Absolutely. Do you have the freedom from people making their own opinions about your speech? Does everyone have to agree with you? Absolutely not. And that could impact your business. So I want you to be strategic about what it is you're engaging in. And I even thought about, should I make this podcast? Because it could frustrate people. There are people who could be listening to this who could say, you know what, Dan, I disagree with you. And that's okay. It's okay if you disagree with me. I'm a proponent of it. I don't think we always have to have agreement. I'm married. I love my wife. We don't agree on everything. Okay. There are things that we like vehemently disagree on. Even like some political things, we don't agree, and that's okay. She likes the Beavers. I like the Ducks, college teams. Like, we are literally called a house divided in Oregon. We are rival schools. We don't agree on everything. I happen to be right about the Ducks being better, but don't worry about that. Definitely at football, maybe not at baseball. All right, everyone. I hope you got something out of this episode. Last week was a tough week for the world. There was a lot of emotion, a lot of feeling, and I hope you are all processing through it. We are stronger together. We can make such an impact in the community that we have in the cheer industry. Let's use it for good purposes. All right, everyone. Hope you enjoyed. We'll catch you on the next episode.